Hi, my name is Chris Case. I am an education project manager with the Agency of Education, and I wanted to talk today about the Vermont Agency of Education's approach to drafting an ESSA state plan. Before we get into what that's going to look like, I want to set a little bit of context around what ESSA was and what it means for the state of Vermont. ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the latest reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. The last reauthorization prior to ESSA was No Child Left Behind, which I think a lot of people are familiar with in terms of its accountability systems. ESSA is the latest version. It was signed into law on December 10th of 2015. And in many ways, it resembles No Child Left Behind. And so states still have the ability to choose learning standards like Common Core, Next Generation Science standards for schools to use as resources, and can choose statewide assessments to help in the assessment of student proficiency. And we also report out student achievement and school performance to the federal government as a part of this work. Equity is also something that's represented in No Child Left Behind and in ESSA. It's emphasized in a different way in ESSA, but it's still a carryover from the ideas that were expressed in No Child Left Behind around eliminating achievement gaps for subgroups of students. There are also some key differences between ESSA and No Child Left Behind. And so in ESSA, states have greater authority to make some decisions and to frame accountability mechanisms. There are also corresponding limitations on federal authority. And so what this means for a state like Vermont that's really done a great job of articulating its mission and its goals over the last couple of years is that we're in a really good place to take the priorities and the values that we've already articulated as a state and infuse those into a federal plan. And so instead of having of running the risk of having duplicative federal and state accountability systems, or having state priorities that don't really speak to our federal priorities, we feel like we can do a really good job of bringing those things together into one cohesive model. I want to talk for a bit now about the process that we're going to use in actually writing our plan. Let's start with the timeline. We're going to be taking this year, 2016, to draft a plan out. That plan is going to go out for public comment in the middle of November, so November 15th. And then we hope to incorporate public comment, public feedback into the draft plan and submit it for public review, or for federal review, by the middle of January of 2017. The goal is to ultimately have a version of our state plan that has been approved by the federal government in time to implement in the 2017-2018 school year. As we go through and make decisions about how we want to approach each of the components of ESSA, we have a decision logic that we're going to be using. And so all of the decisions that we make have to support the ideals of equity, alignment, efficiency, and practicality. When we talk about equity, we're talking about supporting our most vulnerable student populations and communities within the state. And this is something that's at the core of ESSA. It's also at the core of the education. We see opportunities in our state plan to represent a continuation of personalization and proficiency-based learning work, and to continue any of the principles and values that have come out of the last several years of implementing state policy. We want a new plan to be efficient, so we want to avoid duplication of effort wherever possible. That means leveraging federal and resources that are made available through this work. And it also means that we're not going to have duplicative state and federal systems if we can avoid it wherever possible. And finally, we want to have solutions that are reasonable for everybody to implement at the state level. And so when we're talking about practicality, we mean that we want to be able to support the solutions that we identify as an agency of education. And we also don't want schools and supervisory unions and school districts to feel burdened by the accountability model and by the requirements that we come up with through a state plan. Everything needs to be feasible and needs to be realistic. So when we're talking about the teams that are going to be involved in the development of a state plan, there are a group of agency teams, and then we have some field representatives and field teams as well. So the agency teams first. Our leadership team is going to be the team that makes decisions around what goes into the state plan. It's going to be composed of our Secretary of Education and Deputy Secretaries. And then we have a group of people that make up our state plan management team. And the state plan management team, or SPMT, is our coordinating internal team. And they're the ones that are ultimately coordinating all of the different decision points that need to be made, the teams that are working on those decisions, and then funneling proposed decisions up to project leadership for review and approval. When we look at all the decision points that are within ESSA that need to be addressed by the agency, we feel that they all fall into one of four categories: school effectiveness, educator quality, accountability, and the Consolidated Federal Program, CFP. And so we've created 4 bounce teams and one links with each one of those buckets. The idea is that these bounce teams are going to be our nimble action teams, that we're gonna each one is going to have a group of decision points to tackle. These teams are going to be convening groups of stakeholders and drafting what potential policies for the state could be. Those policies will then be passed to our coordinating SPMT team for review, and then passed up to the leadership team for approval or for revisions. And we have a communications team internally that's going to be meeting monthly. That communications team is going to be in charge of making sure that the field, the public, the agency, everybody involved in this work is kept up to speed on what's going on. And then we have our field input team, FIT. And so this is going to be our lead stakeholder team. We wanted to create a group of people that could come in and advise the agency that was relatively representative. We know that that's not possible with a small team. This team is about 15 to 20 members. And we know that we can't possibly represent the breadth of opinions that are present in the state on such a small team, but we thought that this team was a great way to discuss who else might be a part of these conversations in the future. And so this team's primary goal is to look at the decisions that we're trying to deal with, and then to say, we think or we don't think that this decision needs to go out to the field for further comment, and if they feel that it does need to go out to the field, this is the team that also helps us to determine who should be a part of that conversation and how that conversation should play out. Should it be a survey? Should it be a face-to-face conversation? And so we're hoping that through this group, we can identify hundreds of other people in the state that can be involved in these conversations on a rolling basis throughout the year. And so ultimately we can involve a very wide group of stakeholders in this conversation. FIT isn't the only avenue for stakeholder participation. It's just the first. For people that aren't a part of this team but who want to participate in this work, there are going to be many other opportunities to get involved. And the last piece of this I want to do is to take you through how decisions are going to be made at the agency around this plan, and how these teams are all going to be working together. To start with, there are a group of decisions that we've already put out for some review from people in the field. We've gotten some input on, and that we feel with confidence that we can proceed on without further public input. Most of these decisions regard a continuation of current practice that has already represented a significant investment of resources on the agency's part and on the field's part. So examples include the continued use of the Smarter Balance test for grades 3 through 8 as an assessment tool, and continued use of many of the state's learning standards, the Common Core, the Next Generation Science standards, as standards that the field will continue to use when constructing curriculum for classroom instruction. But there also is a pretty large body of decisions that we have a sense of how we'd like to proceed on, but that we want field input on, and that we see field input as being as very realistically changing the direction that the agency might want to take on any one of those decisions. So for all of those decisions, we are going to be trying to identify the core question within that decision that needs to be asked, and then we're going to take that question to FIT, and we're going to ask from that field input team, do we need input from the field on this question? How should we collect that input if we do? And who should we involve in that conversation? FIT is going to provide answers to those questions for us, and then we're going to take those back and review them and do our best to address FIT's expectations. The bounce teams are going to convene groups of stakeholders based on the FIT feedback that we receive, and use it to inform whatever proposals they give to the SPMT or the coordinating team. And then that coordinating team is going to look at those proposals, modify them, revise them as necessary, and then share them with the leadership team for review and hopefully for approval or revisions. As we go about identifying stakeholders, we're going to be doing that through a series of surveys. And so this is something that could be potentially really relevant to anybody watching this presentation who found this on the ESSA page of our website. FIT is going to be providing us with lists of stakeholder groups that they feel would be good to have participating in the conversation, and then we're going to be reaching out to those groups to ask that they complete a survey. And anybody who wants to, any individual that wants to, can complete that survey and say that they want to be a part of a discussion around any number of topics that they select. And then we'll take those surveys and crosswalk survey responses with FIT recommendations. And so, there's no guarantee that people are going to necessarily want to participate in these conversations, but we're going to give everybody that we can the opportunity to say, yes, I'd like to be a part of this conversation if they want to. And then as we identify people who have expressed an interest, who FIT also said that they'd like to see be a part of the conversations and who the agency believes will be very, very valuable to have as a part of the discussion, we're going to bring people in. This doesn't mean that we can bring everybody in who would ideally like to be a part of the conversation. For people who want to be a part of these conversations but who can't do it through work groups or through some other stakeholder feedback group, we still will provide opportunities for people to share their input through another survey, and we will consider that input. But this is a way, we think, for us to represent FIT recommendations in the process, and also to reach out to a very wide subset of stakeholders around the state as a part of this work. If you look at the channel for information, we see that stakeholders are going to be providing information to the bounce teams, these green teams, through their feedback. Bounce teams will be using that stakeholder feedback to craft policy recommendations. Those policy recommendations will go up to the SPMT team, the purple team, for review. And then once the coordinating team, the SPMT team, feels like they're ready to share with leadership, they'll go up to leadership for review and possibly for revisions. This is a breakdown of how we view approaching the decisions that we need to make. And so these are some very broad topic headings. Within each of these cycles of reviewing components of ESSA, developing draft solutions that address those components, there will be variations. Everything that we do in cycles 1 and 2 isn't going to touch specifically on measures of effectiveness, but these are broadly the topics that we anticipate covering. If you want to know more about the questions that are housed within each one of these cycles, that information is available on the ESSA page of the agency website. There is a table dedicated to each of these cycles that spells out what those questions are in more detail. And if you want to keep up to speed generally on the ESSA work, there are different avenues for you to loop into. So the first is the weekly field memo. The weekly field memo is a publication that the agency puts out every week that provides updates as to major project that the agency, major initiatives that the agency is involved with. You can register to receive that electronically by going to the weekly field memo page of the Agency of Education website. The second avenue for communication is to visit the ESSA page of the agency site. And so that's going to be a place where we update people regularly on the decisions that are coming up, the decisions that are going to be made down the road, and the decisions that have already been made. That's all going to be posted on the ESSA page. We invite you to check out back on that page regularly. And we also invite you, if you are a part of a professional organization, to work with the people, the leadership in your professional organization to stay on top of things too. If you feel like you would like to have more communication from that organization around this work, please get in touch with your organization's leadership, and we're going to try to route communication through organizational leadership to filter down to other members of the public in the field. So we hope that through this that we can keep everybody informed who wants to be informed through some combination of these tools. That concludes my presentation today. My name again is Chris Case. My contact information should be at the bottom of the page of the ESSA page of the website. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch, and thank you very much for your time.